All right, folks, so COROS just rolled out some new firmware updates, including a very welcome Strava route integration feature, as well as this new multi-pitch climbing activity profile. And this activity profile is pretty interesting. And then we're also going to go ahead and check out their new VERTIX 2 watch carabiner accessory in this video. So this new multi-pitch climbing activity profile, it's pretty neat, and COROS put a lot of thought into this. So I really want to do a real life demo of this outside, but my knee's been acting a little bit funky lately, so the idea of having to hike in with a bunch of gear just doesn't sound super appealing. So I did put together sort of a demo of this by going to a climbing gym. No, it's definitely not the exact use case for this activity profile, but it does still show you how it works as well as what kind of data it collects. And it's just a little bit easier to understand with a bit of context. So let's first go ahead and check out this carabiner first, and then we can talk about the multi-pitch climbing activity profile as well as the Strava route integration. So I think this watch carabiner accessory for the VERTIX 2 is going to come out in December sometime. So I don't know if this is going to be the exact packaging that they're going to actually have it in, because this is just kind of like a prototype device for reviewers. So I have to say that this is a pretty cool looking accessory. So the carabiner, it's not a locking mechanism, but the spring is actually pretty strong on it. You'll notice that the attachment points for the actual watch, these are going to be held in place with some screws. And then to attach it, all we do is just simply undo the straps from the VERTIX 2. And then we're going to go ahead and attach it in place like this. Okay, so that's a new carabiner accessory, and it's pretty cool. So now let's go ahead and check out the multi-pitch climbing activity profile. So with the new multi-pitch climbing activity profile, it's located at the bottom of the activity list, and then when we select it, it has the same kind of start screen for the most part like other outdoor activities. Oh, and by the way, with the multi-pitch climbing activity profile, it'll actually default to the all satellites dual frequency mode to ensure the best accuracy, since you'll likely be right next to some rock faces, which can throw off GPS signals. So under the start option, there's this item called initial approach, and we'll circle back to this here in a second, but first let's check out the settings. So the first option is grading systems, and then below that is navigation, and these are just all the routes that you have loaded onto the watch, and we'll check this out in a little bit more detail when we talk about Strava route integration. And then you have the activity alerts like other activity profiles. But going back to the grading systems option, here's where you can choose different grading systems depending on where and what you're climbing. So we've got YDS, French, Rock Aid, ice grades, mixed grades, or you don't have to record any grades at all. And I was actually wondering if bouldering grades could be added right here. So bouldering isn't multi-pitch climbing generally, of course, but there's actually a lot of versatility with this activity profile. So I could very well see this activity profile be adapted for single pitch or bouldering in the future. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and pick YDS because that's what I'll be climbing today. So now let's check out this initial approach setting. So if we click into here, there's three options for your initial phase in your multi-pitch climb: approach, climb, and descend. The approach is if you have to hike into your climbing location, which a lot of times you have to do. Climb is if you're already at your climbing destination, and then you can also choose descend if you'd like. Now, since I have the VERTIX 2 attached to the new carabiner accessory, it's obviously not going to be able to collect wrist-based heart rate. So if you do want to collect heart rate for your activity, you'll want to pair it with an external heart rate monitor. Anyhow, you can see from the icon down here that resembles a heart rate strap that I now have a heart rate monitor paired up, and then we go ahead and press start, and it indicates that we're on our approach to the climb. So the data pages are kind of interesting here, and this is where you can tell that COROS did put quite a bit of thought into this. So the first data page shows your current elevation, elevation gain, elevation loss, and total elapsed time. The next data page shows your heart rate, total distance, and time of day. And then there's also another data page showing lap information, as well as a training data page for training load, aerobic training effect, and anaerobic training effect. But then there's this data page which is just for the approach phase that we're currently on, where it shows the phase distance, time, and elevation gain and loss. And you'll notice that the phase time currently matches the total time at the bottom. So now that we're at the base of our first climb, what we're going to do is press the crown button to pause it. And this brings up a screen where there's an option for next, resume, finish, and resume later. So if we choose next, this brings up a menu where we can choose the next phase, whether that be climbing or descending. So we'll go ahead and choose climb, and they have a nice graphic showing that we're now in a climbing phase. And then at this point, the data pages actually change to ones that are more appropriate for climbing, where you have the current pitch elevation gain, pitch time, heart rate, current elevation, and time of day, as well as an indicator on the bottom showing which pitch you're on. And then there's another data page showing your total elevation gain, loss, and 3D distance. And 3D distance basically takes into account vertical distance along with horizontal distance, since you'll likely be going up with this type of activity. And then there's also this data page that shows the data for the entire climbing phase, kind of like what we saw before with the approach phase. So anyways, now that we've selected that we're on the climbing phase, we can just start climbing. Oh, and really quick, if you like the video, if you're finding the information in this video useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button down below. It's a small little thing that you can do to help this video and the channel quite a bit, and I appreciate it. So at this point, I've completed my first route. And by the way, since we're inside, we can kind of ignore the elevation data and GPS data since altimeters and GPS can get wonky indoors. But what I'm going to do now is press the lap key, which is the lower right-hand button. This triggers that I've completed a pitch, and then a menu pops up where I can enter how many pitches I've climbed since I've started. And I think the reason they put these options in there is in the case where you're doing multiple pitches and you don't necessarily want to fiddle with your watch in between each pitch. And there's also the chance that you just may forget to trigger a pitch. Anyhow, since I did one pitch, that's what I'll choose. And then it asks to record the hardest grade during that pitch, or pitches if there were multiple. So I just choose the grade, and then you'll notice that it changes to pitch 2 now. And if we scroll to the phase data page, it still shows that we're on the climb phase. And then from here, basically rinse and repeat based on whatever you're climbing. Now with multi-pitch climbing, you may not necessarily be in one climbing spot all day, so you may do your first set and then have to hike to your next location to climb again. And this is again where I think COROS put a lot of thought into this. So let's say we have to do another approach to another climb. So here's where we can end this climbing phase, but it allows us to choose an approach phase or descend phase. And then when we reach our next spot, we can just switch to another climb phase and then away we go. And basically this is where I think this activity profile has a lot of flexibility because it has all the built-in functionality that's purpose-built for multi-pitch climbing, but with all that versatility, you could very well use this for single pitch climbing if you'd like. Anyhow, now that we're done climbing, it's time to get out of here, and we'll now choose the descend phase, which works just the same as the approach phase. And then when we're finally done with our day, we click finish, and on the activity summary screen, you can see the overall stats for the entire activity, but it also breaks down each phase here. So here's where we can see the initial approach, the climb phase, descend phase to get to another spot, another climb phase, and then the final descent phase. And then we can dive into the details of each one of the phases. Pretty cool stuff. And then when we dive into the app to see the activity details, there's going to be a tab that shows the overall stats for the activity, but then there's also separate tabs for each one of the phases with details on each one. Oh, and then if you do have your Strava account connected, it'll sync over the entire activity as a rock climbing activity in Strava. Now, it'll be interesting to see how many climbers utilize this activity profile. So for me, when I climb, I'm generally focused on climbing, but as a lot of climbers know, there's a lot of downtime too when you're resting your arms. So I suppose there's still plenty of time to interact with the watch if you want to collect that data. Plus, I suppose it is kind of nice to track what you climbed in terms of pitches and grades on a particular day, so it could very well serve as notes too. Either way, I get pretty excited about activity profiles like this because they're not just copying over a generic outdoor activity profile and just slapping a new name on it. This profile took a lot of thought to put together, and it provides in-context data that's specifically designed for this type of actual activity. COROS as well as Garmin do this pretty well, and they both have their ski and snowboard activity profiles that provide context-sensitive data as well as specific functionality for those activity profiles. And I actually do have demonstrations on how both of those work that I'll have linked down in the description below. Anyhow, sorry, that was kind of long-winded, but there was a lot to cover, but now let's move on to Strava route integration. So if you checked out my VERTIX 2 versus Fenix 6 real-life comparison video, you may have remembered that I said this. Right now with COROS devices, it's a little bit cumbersome to get a route into your watch. That will be changing in the future. And that's what I was referring to, is that Strava routes will now automatically sync over to your COROS app, which you can then use with your COROS watch that has navigation capabilities. But just note that you do have to have a Strava subscription for this feature. So to get a route into your Strava route library, which will then be synced over, this can be done in a bunch of ways, but the easiest way is to just go to the map tab in the Strava app, go to routes right here, and then you can choose from some routes that they suggest. You just click save and then just make sure it's starred right here. Or if you want to create a custom route, you can literally just draw out a route by using this little pencil icon right here. Anyhow, once you have a route in your route library, like I mentioned earlier, just make sure that's starred as a favorite because that'll ensure that the route will be synced over to the watch. So now let's hop over to the COROS tab and we'll go over to the device tab. So we'll choose my route, and then here's where we can see the routes I already have loaded onto the watch. But do note this little thing at the bottom of the screen where it shows how many routes you have loaded onto the watch and how many more that you can load, because there's currently it only has a 10 route limit. And then what you'll do from here is click on import from library, and then it'll bring up your navigation routes library. And if your new route isn't here for some reason, you can pull down to refresh the routes, but it can sometimes take a few minutes for the route to show up from Strava. And it's not usually instantaneous, but it's usually just a few minutes. And then what you'll do from here is just click on whichever route or routes that you'd like to sync over the watch, click add, do a quick sync with the watch, and then boom, there's your new route or routes on the watch itself. Anyhow, that was kind of a long video just for a firmware update, but I thought it was kind of neat to do a deep dive on that new multi-pitch activity profile. And I plan to do a lot more of these deep dives in the future. So make sure to subscribe to get a notification when those videos come out. And if you did like the video, or if you found the information in this video useful, make sure to hit that like button down below. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.